I feel if I play the piano, it's easier to express myself than flipping talking.
The most magic thing about this situation is I just happened to say wake up. I'd started the sentence when I was a kid and finished it now. Like how lucky did I get?
And then I go right to sleep. And in the mornings, I stretch my arms and wake up
Next to me.
What else you got? What do you think of your granny?
My granny keeps me nice and warm at bedtime because I've got her bed. And then she gets me up and reads me a book sometimes, and then I go right to sleep.
Oh, do you?
And in the mornings, I stretch my arms and wake up.
Come into Grandad's room and wake him up.
Then I go to see Dad in his bedroom. He's not in there. I go to Granny's in there. She's not in there. Dad's downstairs and Granny's sleeping upstairs in her bedroom that she doesn't normally sleep in. And then I have my breakfast and I go to school, shut the door, and bang.
What's the bang?
It's the door.
Oh, what's it?
You're not going to say anything?
No. I wanted to write this record that was bright and ethereal and really confident sounding, and I wanted it to feel slightly more uplifting. But a lot of the record and a lot of how I was writing it was about particular situations with people that I still am kind of suffering through at the moment in my life. And as I wrote the record, I spent the first few months writing the record, and it had this really bright, positive, confident feel to it. It's not a representation of the tonality of the lyrics, but the feel of the album and the sonic space was really powerful. And then during the process of the record, we were on Anything Else. And I left the studio for the weekend and I went to see some friends over the weekend and coincidentally happened to bump into one of the people that I'm still dealing with some of this situation. I have a circumstance with them that's difficult that I've been writing about. And the weekend was terrible. And I ended up in this altercation and it really didn't, I did everything in my power for it to be positive and it didn't go well. And I came back from that weekend and I went into the studio and the second half of Anything Else was written. And initially Anything Else had this completely different outro. It was this big, weirdly EDM, hyper space that we'd written. And I scrapped it and I was so, everything was so on the surface. And we scrapped it and I was this doesn't feel enough, and it's the perfect example of how I'm feeling is dictating the way that this music's written, And I took the guitar and we wrote this huge section for the rest of the track, and it immediately there was the essence of the album had changed completely, and suddenly I was writing in the real time, and the first half of that album was written in hindsight of how I felt about this situation with this particular person. And then halfway through the record, suddenly after seeing that person, it changed the way that the album continued. Suddenly I was living in it as it was getting written. It was this really cathartic, weird experience where all of a sudden, all this pain that I was writing about from years before was right here with me. And I was channeling it immediately into the album, and suddenly the album became this really heavy, massive space full of so much pain that I was feeling as it was happening. It's this really beautiful thing, especially coincidentally that the timing meant that I could channel it and get it through me really quickly, so it didn't bury me. everything we use and everything we create is this like real thing. It, like for example, it's me at the start of the record from when I was like a child, and I think people just think they're random moments that I've just pulled in because it sounds good, and I don't think they understand the kind of realness that's going on there. It feels like sometimes we have these parts that like I feel like not every single thing that we're doing at the time should make it to the project. 42 had it, You and Everything Blue had it, Me and Mouse and Mind had loads of it. In the documentary, there's like something that me and Ari wrote together on the organ. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Like in the documentary, in the hidden location. I loved it. I loved it so much. Like that.
Sullii?
Some hi-hats at the beginning. I loved it. I loved it so much, and like the same as when I was trying to write Foul, I accidentally wrote this other riff, and then I found the clip of it, and we ended up using it at the beginning of the documentary, and it was my like the most monumental thing that I'd written. Just this one tiny piece of piano, like the simplest form, and I just fell so utterly in love with it, and that's why it ended up being at the end of Wake Up Next to Me, because I just held on to it, and I was like, this is so special. I had to wait till it was kind of right to use it. Maybe this will surface. You and Everything Blue is a really good example, because at that moment in my life I'd met these two people, and they come into my life pretty intently and suddenly was just dictating all of my time, and I was just in this period of my life where everything was so different, and I loved them dearly. I had these two people, they came into my life, I loved them so dearly, and I knew that they were meant to be there. I was just presented immediately with this fragility. There was no flaw, and everything that I had written from You and Everything Blue forward orbited around this motive of this scenario with these people, because I'd never had a situation in my life before where I felt so overwhelmed with love and security and fragility in like this harmonious space. I was so aware that everything I loved in that moment was kind of already written to be taken away from me, and it was the most difficult thing to balance, because I was trying to be as vulnerable to the situation as possible so that I could feel and breathe as much of it as I could in, whilst just knowing that it was going to just destroy me. I had this voice memo to Jacob, I think, to Ari, that I ended up putting in the record on You and Everything. And I had this love in my life, and I didn't know where to place it. I didn't know who or where it came from or how I was feeling. I just felt really, really safe and really not safe. They were so paralleled, but it came so quickly into my life that it shook me, but I knew that it was something relevant to these two people. I just couldn't put my finger on how I felt to who or where to put that feeling. So I just breathed it all in and existed in it for this short period of time. And then, just as I knew, it was written as quickly out of my life, and I put it in the record.
What's good? I just wanted to keep flooding. I had someone in my life at that time that was like super important to me, and I had a couple people actually. And I spent 3 years maybe after writing that record
sat meticulously trying to understand how I felt, and I couldn't put I couldn't understand it, and it was the most frustrating thing for me because, to be completely honest, it was like a moment of safety that I hadn't felt for a very, very long time, leading up to that moment, and I see it all around me, and I just don't seem to get it myself, and I felt so blessed, and I felt it was so robbed from me. And I'd spent these 3 or 4 years trying to understand how I felt, and I realised that the way I was feeling was this security I felt I'd placed in the wrong place. I put this security that I felt, I managed to gather it all and put it in this one place, and it was this one person, and I just felt that it was really clear to me, and I tried to put it out into the universe that I've got it, I understand, I know that it's coming from this one person, and I put it in Wake Up Next to Me, and I took that voice memo and I cut it out. I took out that there was these 2 people because there wasn't anymore, and I put it into the end of the album just so that I wanted people to understand the journey that we'd been on over these 4 years of me writing and them listening to these records together, and I wanted them to know that there isn't a next chapter. I had understood slightly what was going on, and that's why Wake Up Next to Me is this very, very definite thing. All of a sudden, all the lucidness and the elusivity and all of this uncertainty is completely honed in, and Wake Up Next to Me is this extremely definite body of work where I know exactly how I feel, and even though there's a lot of question and misunderstanding, I am so aware of how I feel about this scenario now, and that's why it's this extremely confident and extremely tunnel vision record. And I cut it out. And I don't know if these little moments or intricacies in these albums just go straight over people's heads, but for me, from You and Everything Blue to Wake Up Next to Me, out of those 4 years and those 4 records, I had taken a step forward into understanding how I felt, and that's why through all of the question and the doubt, I still had this extremely definite record that I feel resonated with everyone way harder, because suddenly I was so unbelievably sure of how I felt, and why it's so literal and why it's really dedicated to my understanding of that situation. These moments I feel get wasted sometimes because I don't sit and talk about them and people don't understand. Sometimes I feel like maybe I leave it too open to the listener's interpretation. However, maybe this will help.
Try keep holding back. I don't get me back. I'm for real. Maybe we'll be fine. Always stole my time. Wake up next to me. Yeah.
The reason that Wake Up Next to Me is so dramatically different to everything that we've done so far is because we're I really let myself be submissive to that project and channel a lot of the upset and that I was feeling through the years leading up to it. And there's this subtle confusion and bitterness in Me and My Absent Mind and You and Everything Blue, and it's just confused and bitter, and it's this very lucid space where I didn't really know what the hell was going on. I started to feel like I was coming out of it and that I was I found so much love with being by myself, and I've spent years and years of my life not really living anywhere and travelling around and spending a lot of my time on my own. I found so much love and confidence being on my own. I just had this overwhelming, empowered feeling, oh man, I want to uplift these people, they've been with me for a long time. And I just want them to feel like as confident as I do in this moment and as like self-assured. And then I just had this moment where during the record I went and just happened to bump into this person I really cared for. I really struggle without having closure on situations, and it was just a massive step back into a different part of my life that I really didn't want to slip back into so immediately. And all of the walls surrounding that security just came crashing down around me. I was absolutely bombarded and just crumpled like a leaf underneath me so quickly. And next thing I know, the record has just become something completely different, and all my empowered thoughts and all of my confidence just got pulled away from me. And I think that's why it resonated with so many people, and I think that's why Wake Up Next to Me is so important to people, and why it landed differently to the other records. Because I didn't have any choice but to be submissive to that record entirely. The last thing I wanted to do ever was write a record that had any sonic resemblance to any of the heavier projects I'd done before. Just not in my interest whatsoever. Anytime I'd been in a project before Sullii, it was the hardest time in my life and resembled really, really traumatic experiences for me. And I felt like that was transparent with the writing. I thought people understood that from listening to the lyrics. That's why I never talk about it. It's just a really, really horrible time in my life. And I got brought back to this like an old friend, you know. I was distraught very quickly in the process of writing Wake Up Next to Me, and had to let it take me. And I guess in hindsight it's become a beautiful thing, because maybe I just needed to kind of completely let go to my own writing for once, you know.